Psalm 44, we left off yesterday at verse 16. Now, we've come through the first two parts of this psalm. We're moving into the third part. The first part is, God, we've heard that you are great and that you have brought us through a lot of victories in our history. We've heard the stories. We talked through all of that. That we trust in God, our boast is in God. Then verse 9 starts the second part of the psalm. The second part of the psalm, you'll notice the first verse starts with but. Hey, we've heard this, but this isn't our experience. God, you have left us to defeat. You've cast us off. You've put us to shame. Our enemy has spoiled us. You've allowed us to be slaughtered. You scattered us among the heathen. You sold us for nothing. You didn't get anything for the sale. We are a reproach. We are scorned. We're in derision. And people are shaking their head and scorning us. We're like a curse word. We're like a throwaway word. And because of this, verse 15, I'm confused. It gets personal there. We talked about this yesterday. My confusion is continually before me. I'm ashamed, verse 15 says, because, verse 16, of the voices of reproach. The scorners, the mockers, are putting me to confusion. I'm confused, God. You've left me confused for the moment. Now, remember this, God is not the author of confusion, but Satan wants to confuse us, and he wants to falsely accuse God so that we become confused about what God is doing. And the psalmist here is under the inspiration of God, honestly expressing his experience of God, which is an amazing understanding that the emotional self is subject to the spiritual, to the authority of the Word of God, the covenant of God, the personhood of God. And this isn't what our society teaches us today. Our culture teaches us that our emotional self, our psychological self, is the authoritative part of our being, and how detrimental, how flawed and broken that really is. When we elevate our emotions and our psychology to the seat of authority in our lives, we're in deep, deep trouble. We're headed no place good. So look at the turn here in verse 17, because this opens part 3, or essentially the third paragraph of the psalm. All this is come upon us. So in totality, all of this, God, and again, this is a prayer to God. It's raw, it's maybe a bit accusatory, it is transparent, it's true. You can't surprise God, okay? God knows how you're feeling, and when you pretend with God that you don't feel how you truly feel, you're not faking him out. He doesn't fall for it. You're just barring access. Your true access to him is based upon the work of Jesus, which means it's based on your abject weakness and brokenness, which means for it to be real, for God to be drawn to you, you got to be honest with him. You can't fake him. You can't come to God in pretense, expecting to fake him out and then him work on your behalf or work in you. It doesn't work that way. God's work in you starts with when you hit bottom and you're just wide open before him and completely vulnerable and completely honest. And that's what's beautiful about this psalm. So all this has come upon us, yet, and here's the resolve and the response of this person and these people. Yet have we not forgotten thee, neither have we dealt falsely in thy covenant. Now, let me break down, yet have we not forgotten thee first, okay? So first, it's a resolve. God, we're not giving up. We're not forgetting. We're not going to walk away. We're not letting go of our faith. How many people I know in my life that God did not do what those people wanted him to do. He didn't give the outcomes in the moment that they anticipated or expected to their satisfaction. I use the word genie or so they walked away. He wasn't just serving them. I give to the I gave you a chance, God, to come through for me. You didn't at large. So I'm going to go work another plan. I'm going to go find another strategy. If anybody wanted, COVID has been a purifying time for the church. And they had a perfect excuse, okay? I'm not saying that that this correlates directly to attending church or something like that, okay? Because I realize there are many that watch this broadcast that you're not able to come to church yet. You shouldn't come to church yet. I support that, okay? But all over the world, there are people that should have returned to church by now that simply haven't. And their pastors, their shepherds, their spiritual leaders are reaching out, texting, emailing, calling, trying to reach out and connect with them. And there is none whatsoever response. So, I mean, that just says I'm checked out. Like, I don't want my spiritual connection, at least to this body or that group of people or that pastor or that church. But there are a lot of people that have spiritually just walked away from God and fallen away. Paul predicted this. He said that it was possible to become a shipwreck. He prayed for the Thessalonians that Satan would not have the advantage over them. He talked about himself possibly being a castaway. He talked about Demas forsaking him, having loved the present world. There are lots of reasons that people forget God. I'm preaching to the choir because you're sitting here on a Tuesday watching a devotional video. So I seriously doubt you are one of them. But if you happen to cross this video and you happen to be a person that is feeling the conviction of, I've forgotten God in my life, the good news is, friend, you can come right back, okay? His arms are open. His invitation is there. His mercy is always inexhaustible. So don't let the fact that you've fallen away keep you away. Don't let the fact that you've forgotten God keep you from coming right back and remembering him, okay? But let me just drive this deep for just a second. Don't let circumstances, don't let your faith, your covenant with God, your devotion to him ride on temporal circumstances. Ever, ever, ever. This is the big lesson of this psalm. We never let our faith rest on temporal circumstances because God can change them that fast. And if he doesn't change them, it means he's working through them and he's working in them and he's working a plan in me in them. Okay, and this is what the psalmist knew. Even though the experience was miserable, the psalmist knew that God's working here and God's going to come through. So we're not going to forget him. We're not giving up on him. Our faith isn't paper thin or ice thin, thin ice. It's bedrock. It's strong. And this is what the next phrase teaches us. Neither have we dealt falsely in thy covenant. Now, God's covenant, God is a covenant God. And I wish I had a little more time here. I'm running out of time. My brother texted me one day and he said, Cary, dispensational theology or covenant theology? And boy, how do you answer that on a text message, okay? And I texted him back. I said both for reasons I can't go into in a simple text because it's a very complex question. And he sent back a laughing emoji and said, I figured that you'd say something like that, but I'm glad to hear that in some sense both are true and in some sense both have problems. There are extremes of dispensationalism that are very, very erroneous. There are extremes of covenant theology that are very, very erroneous. The bottom line is God has worked in dispensations, time periods, Old Testament, New Testament, if nothing else, okay? And those are his divisions, very clearly his divisions. But God is a God of covenant, and he has made covenants. He has made covenants with his followers throughout time. Some of those covenants are conditional. If you, then I. Okay? If my people, ancient Israel, which are called by my name, will humble themselves and pray, then will I hear from heaven and will heal their land, forgive their sin, heal their land. I think that's too often, attached patriotically to the geopolitical nation state of America and the political idea of Americanism. But nonetheless, that is a covenant offer from God. There's the we add the words I see to all these covenants, going back to the people involved. Abraham, Abrahamic covenant. David, Davidic covenant. Moses, Mosaic covenant. Each of these covenants are significant in Israel's history, and some of them extremely significant in our salvation. Okay, some of his covenants were conditional, but his most wonderful covenants were unconditional, and the new covenant is unconditional. The new covenant is God is keeping his part of the covenant and your part through Jesus. The covenant is a beautiful thing, and maybe I'll take more time tomorrow, but it's a sacred thing. It's higher than commitment. It is the free will, the love-driven entering into of a legal obligation. A covenant says, I love you so much, I'm going to legally obligate myself to love you regardless of your behavior. An unconditional covenant that's how that works. So the psalmist, I believe, has an understanding of God's unconditional covenant. Well, in an unconditional covenant, there's the possibility of exploiting or abusing the covenant. In other words, it's kind of like this. If I know my spouse is going to be faithful to me, if my spouse says, even if you betray me, even if you commit adultery, even if you cheat on me, I'm not going anywhere. Well, that should compel a deep, abiding, a deeper devotion to my return or response covenant. Well, I would never want to exploit that. I would never want to betray that. But an unconditional covenant can be exploited or betrayed by an immature person. They can take advantage of it. But that love of an unconditional covenant is so strong that even when it's exploited, it doesn't cave. It doesn't give in. And when the psalmist says, neither have we dealt falsely in thy covenant, there's the sense here of the psalmist saying, we understand, God, if we gave up on you, you still would not give up on us. But God, we're not going to do that. We're not going to betray or profane or dishonor your covenant. In all of this, God, regardless of the circumstances, we love you. We will remain your covenant people no matter what. And so, my friends, drive deep today and don't let your faith rest in circumstances. God is still God, even when the circumstances make you feel otherwise. Hey, I'll see you tomorrow.